All right, so we're going to get into a lot of deep information here about this card, Justice, the Path of Lamed, the 11th key. I always want people to keep in mind, too, like the keys of the tarot are just that. They're the keys. The paths are a separate thing. So every tarot card, every key of the tarot, it belongs to a path on the 32 paths of wisdom. So the 11th key, Justice, the path color of it is emerald green. The related sound is F sharp. The sign is Libra or cardinal air. It means the ox goad, the thing they used to pry oxes to get them to move. The simple letter is work, and the esoteric title is the daughter of the Lords of Truth, or the ruler of the balance. So the 22nd path is the faithful intelligence, and is so called by it because by it spiritual virtues are increased, and all dwellers on the earth are nearly under its shadow. Let's get into the Wang material. Now, we have to keep in mind that Robert Wang, he made this card here. This is the Golden Dawn version of it. Actually, while I'm here on this slide, just so you know, there's the path right there. And in the four worlds, which we'll look at later, you can see the colors on the path, which Crowley really put in his card for this one. Okay, so let's get into it. So the path of Lamed, Justice, is between Tifereth and Gabora. And I really hope by now that most of you kind of know like where the Sephra are. If you don't, that's cool, because you could just be watching this stuff for the first time. But the path lies between Tifereth, which is this sphere, and Gabora, which is that sphere. And I have it up in this picture too, but it's kind of small. So the path of Lamed, Justice, is between Tifereth and Gabora. Lamed means ox goad, the spear-like prod, which keeps the ox moving down the road. And this attribution points to the letter's special relationship with Aleph, the ox, or the path of the fool. Now, their interaction is especially complex, although the essential principles can be simply stated. Justice maintains the balance of the tree so that the outpouring energy of the fool, which has sometimes been called the Holy Ghost, will operate within the confines of a natural pattern. Justice is the administrator of the laws of Bina, written by the Hierophant. It is the ruler of balance. It is called the faithful intelligence because its spiritual values are increased and all dwellers on the earth are nearly under its shadow. Now, this should not be interpreted to mean the intelligence of faith. Rather, it is the intelligence which is faithful to that symbolized by the fool. Without Lamed, Aleph could not function as it does. Without Justice, the Fool card could not function as it does. Moreover, the entire tree of life is related to the 22nd path, the number of which is the totality of all paths. Justice is not one solitary figure of force. It's an amalgam of all the paths which are self-focused. The alignment of the forces has been described as being within the essential life force, symbolized by the Fool card. The activity of justice is set at work continuously in the above and below, in the greater universe, and in the individual soul. Taken to the most mundane, as we drive a vehicle down the road, the justice is our correcting of the wheel back and forth in either direction to keep the vehicle centered. Such a purposeful, equilibrating function occurs in our bodies, where nourishment must be balanced and continual to keep operating as proper repositories for the spirit. And an equilibrating function occurs in our personalities, where no constant extreme of behavior can be tolerated if we want to operate effectively in our environments. So justice works both through reason and through natural force. We may decide to bring something of ourselves into balance, but if we don't make that decision, as we all know, it will be made for us. If we deprive our bodies of sleep, we find ourselves forced to rest, unless you're on drugs or something, which you see the justice of what happens there, right? You get the point. So we might simply collapse. Now, the same process occurs at all levels of justice through the four worlds. We may make a conscious decision, or it may be made for us. But in any event, this intelligence is faithful. It guides and protects us. A lot of times, sometimes we think something devastating happens in our lives and takes us away from a path we thought we were supposed to be on, but it's actually guiding us on the path we should be on. Now, Crowley's title, Adjustment, is pretty appropriate. He doesn't call it Justice. His card is called Adjustment. And I'll show you a quick glance of that if you don't have the card. Totally different than the other cards, right? So you got Wang's card here, then you have the Weight card, the Case card, and then look at Crowley's card. Crowley's card is really cool in my opinion because it uses the colors in the four worlds on that path. You can see the colors there, which he's known to do in his cards. Okay. Now, it's appropriate. So this is a path where whatever's necessary is done to bring the organism into balance. A process which, as the symbol of the sword suggests, is not always pleasant. This is the sword of Gabora, which cuts away all that which is unnecessary, the extraneous dead wood of nature. It is a severe experience, though no punishment is implicit. There is no question of good, bad, right, or wrong. As Gareth Knight expresses it, quote, "The point to remember in all this is that all the God forms are just aspects of the soul itself and not external agencies. Thus, the process may be considered psychologically as a condition of self-assessment." End quote. The soul weighs itself on the scales in the left hand and then makes necessary adjustments wielding the sword in the right. One will observe that when the sephra are placed in the human body, Gabora is at the right hand and Chesed at the left. So I don't have a picture of it, but if you put this up against the human body, you would see the sword. Well, you could look at Waite's card, see where the sword is. That sword is definitely corresponding with Gabora here. And in Waite's card, the balances will correspond with Chesed, which is here. Now, in Case's card, it's kind of the same, but his balances are closer to the Tifereth here. It all kind of means the same thing, but we'll get to that. The sword of justice, or the weapon of Elohim Gabor, or God of Gabora, is fearful. It can be swift and devastating in its cutting away of what is no longer needed. It can make war, it can enforce peace, but the sword has two edges, one of which destroys and the other of which consecrates, as in the conferring of knighthood. The cutting away of the negative aspects of the body and soul is a return to purity or a consecration. This idea of renewal purity is reinforced by the attribution of Libra and the kidneys, which cleanse waste from the body system. Another parallel suggested by some writers is that this path relates to purgatory, or a condition of consciousness after death where the soul is cleansed of the dross of its earthly incarnation. And if you've listened to the show and all the stuff that happens in out-of-body experiences when some of these travelers meet people that have passed away, that kind of makes sense. So, pursuant to the idea of incarnation and reincarnation, this card is said to represent karma, a principle generally understood as the reaping by a newborn soul of what it has sown in its past lives. However, Paul Case insists that the term has been misunderstood. He states that what karma really means is just action. This is an action which is a continuous adjustment. He also describes this key as it's related to education insofar as lamed means to teach, or the Hebrew letter lamed means to teach. This is an especially interesting observation not found elsewhere. The conscious maintenance of balance is definitely a learning process. We learn often slowly and painfully how to analyze and rebalance ourselves as necessary for different situations. That's absolutely been true in my life. The more we learn of the inner worlds, the more subtle and difficult this becomes. Perfect balance is a formula so precise that the Egyptians symbolized its delicacy as the human soul weighed against a feather. These ancients had a concept of right, truth, law, and rectitude, expressed by the single word ma'at. This originally meant that which is straight, but came to mean also a rule of measure of some kind or a law. Ma'at was symbolized by the feather against which either the heart of the deceased or his whole body was weighed. In some illustrations, we find this weighing administered by Anubis and the results recorded by Thoth. Crowley relates both of these gods to the 19th path of strength, which is the balance between Geburah and Chesed, severity and mercy. The implication is that the adjustment which takes place on the 22nd path is administered and recorded through the process of the 19th path. However, as a goddess, Ma'at represented moral law and truth. She was in essence the personification of the concept of Ma'at. And this goddess, who is shown on the Crowley card, let's move to the Crowley card here. Pretty intense looking card, isn't it? It is this goddess who is shown on the Crowley card, crowned with her attribute, the ostrich feather. The weighing of souls is, of course, also implied in the Golden Dawn card, the Weight and the Marseille versions, the latter two being medieval in tone. In the Golden Dawn card, sorry, it's a little fuzzy. It's hard to find Golden Dawn cards on the internet. But in the Golden Dawn card, the figure of a woman rests her feet on a jackal, the animal attributed to Anubis, who supervises the weighing of souls. She holds scales, which, as in the Crowley card, are black, as a reference to both Bina and Saturn. This means not only assessment, but restriction, which is also time, an important aspect of the administration of the law. By contrast, the Weight version, as well as the one produced by Paul Foster Case or the builders of the Adytum, shows golden scales, meaning, let's look at that case card here. There we go. These show golden scales, meaning that the individual soul is measured as it stands within the pure golden light of Tifereth. It is only under this light that the sword of Geburah does its work, as is suggested by the Ma'at legend. Ma'at relates to the sun god Ra. She's in fact known as the daughter of Ra, as she is Kabbalistically named the daughter of the Lords of Truth, and the Egyptians also called her Queen of Heaven. But most important is that Ma'at is the regulator of the path of the sun, and the Egyptian text suggests that it is through Ma'at that the sun subsists, for Ra is said to rest upon Ma'at and to live by Ma'at. In our terms, this means that the principles of the path of justice maintain Tifereth. We maintain a balance in our soul, or the Tifereth, or some people call it Christ consciousness. But insofar as Ra is the source of all light, he is also the fool. Thus one can paraphrase and say that Aleph rests upon Lamed, and that Lamed is the regulator of the path of the divine life force. The relationship between Aleph and Lamed, or the fool in justice, conceals the greatest secret of the tarot, one which, as Crowley said, quote, beyond all planetary and zodiacal considerations, which means Kether. And his book of the law, Aleph Lamed, is the key to the entire universe, revealing a mystery of unspeakable profundity. And on the tree of life, Aleph Lamed is also the god name of Chesed, or the demiurge, or the lesser creator, from which the microprosopos is formed. Again, when we look at Chesed being here, that's where they're talking about, right? Well, that's a line. Give me a circle. Chesed is here. So that's where the lesser creator would be. They're microprosopos. Or the microprosopos is formed. So a great many planets are involved in this card. Let me put it back on. There we go. A great many planets are involved in this card. First is Venus, which rules Libra, to which this path is directly attributed. Mars is related because this is an exercise of the purging energies of Geburah. The sun is involved not only because the path runs from the sun to Mars, but because justice must take place in the clear, bright sunlight of truth. Saturn has already been mentioned and is exalted in Libra. And finally, there's Jupiter, which is the planet of Chesed, which I just showed you Chesed, the blue sphere, and also the planet of Aleph Lamed. So to state that Libra is ruled by Venus is also to state that behind justice stands the Empress, the primary path of Venus, which is the perfect balance between the energies of Chokmah and Bina. The reference is also to the nature forces of Netzach. Now, having noted that Lamed in some way refers to all of the 22 paths in Hebrew letters, it is interesting to recall that Venus refers to all of the Sephiroth. Venus is the only planet whose symbol encompasses every single Sephiroth on the tree of life. I think I can do this. I'm going to try to do this. Making a Venus. Okay. It's kind of a Venus, but see, that's what they're talking about. The glyph encompasses every Sephiroth on the tree of life. Now, what does that imply? That implies that love is the ultimate power of the universe. So thus to say that Venus rules Libra or Lamed is to say that which encompasses all the Sephiroth rules that which encompasses all the paths. So this is understood, again, by considering the idea that the Sephiroth are objective, while the paths between the Sephiroth, or the spheres, are subjective. Objectivity and subjectivity are complementary conditions. One cannot exist without the other, and more than the color red can exist without the possibility of green, or the energies of Mars can exist without those of Venus. So even the floor of the Golden Dawn card, once we look at the floor on the Golden Dawn card here, even the floor of the Golden Dawn card on which lies the Jackal of Anubis refers to the complementary condition that of greater and lesser creators. The white, which actually represents pure brilliance in Kether, while purple is the color of Chesed and Atziluth. And all of the symbolism here points to the idea that this figure is keeping opposites in balance. It is a regulator of energy. Perhaps surprisingly, weight emphasizes the Mars aspect of justice over its Venus when you look at the Arthur Edward Waite card. A lot of red in this one, huh? So weight emphasizes the Mars aspect of justice over its Venus aspect by having the figure clothed primarily in red. And if his card is considered on the pattern of the Tree of Life, when the card is placed on the path of Lamed, it will be seen that the raised sword points to Geburah, while the scales are lowered in the direction of Tifereth. Now the same purple, as in the Golden Dawn tile floor, appears on the cloth of honor behind the figure. The background itself is yellow, which means Tifereth. So he's talking about this, that card. Okay. So the differences in the colors of the three versions of justice point out the differing concepts of the designers. The Golden Dawn emphasizes green flashing against a red throne with a pale blue background. Crowley's card relies on the blues and greens of the 22nd path in the four worlds, which I showed you guys earlier. There's the colors on that path in the four worlds. And look, there's Crowley's card, which he makes pretty explicit in there, right? The blues are especially vibrant as a reference to the effect of Jupiter on the path. Crowley's adjustment is among the most abstract of his keys. He calls the figure not only the goddess Ma'at, but also Harlequin, the partner and fulfillment of the Fool. So keep in mind when the DC Comics came out and they made the Joker and Harley Quinn, I think they knew the energies of the Fool and the Justice card. Ma'at corresponds to Harlequin, or the Harlequin, or Harley Quinn. The partner and fulfillment of the Fool. Now, the figure stands within a diamond shape, which is the Vesica Pisces, and behind her is a throne of spheres and pyramids, and groups of four, meaning law and limitation. This is another reference to Chesed. As Ma'at, she wears ostrich feathers with the Uraeus serpent, lord of life and death, on her forehead. And she holds the sword, a male symbol in this context, in such a way to suggest sexual union. Of course, that's Crowley's cards, right? And the completion of the female. This is what is described in 777 as the woman justified. By equilibrium and self-sacrifice is the gate. End quotes. By equilibrium and self-sacrifice is the gate. A scale springing from a point above her head weighs all that is in creation, the Alpha and Omega, and she is total equilibrium, yet in constant motion at the same time. She's the ultimate illusion, which is manifestation. She's the dance of many-colored, many-wild of life itself. constantly whirling. All possibilities are enjoyed under the phantom show of space and time. All things are real, and the soul is the surface, precisely because they are instantly compensated by this adjustment. All things are harmony and beauty. All things are truth, because they cancel out. So speaking of Crowley's card, let's get deeper into, how we do this. We go from the Golden Dawn, Robert Wang, into what Crowley said and Duquette said, and then we move into Paul Foster Case. So if we go into Duquette's work here, as he studies the card, which I think is really cool. It's short and convenient. Same thing. The daughter of the Lords of Truth, the ruler of the balance, the zodiacal trump of Libra, Venus rules, Saturn exalted. Its original design is a conventional figure of justice with scales and balances, which is, you could see that on the weight card. The Hebrew letter is Lamed, which means the ox goad, and the tree of life path is 22, joining Geburah, severity, to Tiferet, beauty. We already showed you that. The colors are emerald green, blue, deep blue green, and pale green. Balanced against each, though its exact opposite, for the marriage of these is the annihilation of illusion. So some of the notes that, remember that when Crowley and Harris were making these cards, they would write back and forth to each other. So Harris wrote this to Crowley between November 3rd and December 19th in 1939. She said, "The woman satisfied from the cloak of the vivid wantonness of her dancing wings issues her hands. They hold the hilt of the phallic sword of the magician, and she holds the blade between her thighs." And then Harris again wrote to Crowley and said, "I will do a new justice. Damn her. Do you think there was ever a woman satisfied? ? With what a smirk she would greet the dawn." And then Crowley wrote back to Harris and says, "Well, and my experience of satisfied women is that they do greet the dawn with a smirk, if not the dawn, anytime up to 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and only when it wears off does one have to start all over again." But these notes on justice, or as we have preferred to call her, adjustment, I suppose, was in a very bad temper when I made my criticism. But I do feel strongly that the plumes of Ma'at are too insignificant, and the dove and raven look simply stuck on, nor do I think that the tessellated pavement is quite right. So this is when they were making the card. I think she had something that was different than this card, so he's critiquing her now. So the general criticism is that the card is a little too cold. Libra is the sign of autumn, season of mists and mellow fruitfulness, close bosom friend of the maturing sun. In your card, you have got the idea of balance static, whereas it ought to be dynamic. Nature is not the grocer weighing out a pound of sugar. It is the compensation of complicated rhythms. I should like you to feel that every adjustment was a grand passion. Compensation should be a festival, not a clerk smugly pleased that his accounts are correct. The way he's saying this too is like he's coming from like the Venus version, and he's upset that there's like too much Saturnian stuff. It seems to me that this doctrine is very important as a commentary on the text, "Existence is pure joy," and I feel sure that the connection of Venus and Saturn with the sign is significant in this respect. The compensation is surely the awakening of the eld of the All-Father, the constant reproduction of the original purity from the last stage of illusion. Now compare what I said above about the number 10. So to return to adjustment, those birds bother me very much, which we don't really see those. He must be talking about her first draft. I don't think that they belong. I think they come from Noah's Ark, and it would be better to simplify this card by leaving them out altogether. So I feel sure that when you get the Venus and Saturn dancing motive firmly in your mind, you'll produce a lady whom you will like better. And that's what Crowley wrote to Harris. Now Harris wrote back to Crowley and said, "The adjustment is being queer with me. She has, after all, insisted on being Beardsley. Also, Harlequin comes in and out of it, so I must have to submit. But why Harlequin? Is there any connection? Also, she won't sit down but stands on her toes, just balanced. The design result is good. That blue is cobalt, I take it. The instruction says blue, blue-green, pale green, emerald. That emerald is a vile pigment in poster paints." So here, Harris is struggling a little bit. Let me see. And this is kind of cool to read their letters back and forth while they're making this card. But Judging from what is written and the above excerpts from Crowley to Harris, Lanmalo Duquette says, this correspondence, it's clear that the early drafts of adjustment bore little resemblance to the finished product. Crowley had a clear idea what was needed, and the fact that he wrote so passionately on the matter underscores the importance he ascribed to this card. His words are aimed, however, not only at Freda Harris, the artist, but at Sor Saba, the magical student, so he was trying to teach her at the same time. He not only wanted the adjustment card to turn out the way he wanted Harris to appreciate its spiritual importance and achieve an epiphany of understanding. It appears to me that they both were successful. The goddess of adjustment is in perfect balance, left to right and top to bottom. Amid spheres of light and darkness, she stands on tiptoe at the very point of her sword. An enormous set of balances suspends from the perfect point of her crown the ostrich plumes of Ma'at, the Egyptian goddess of justice. The left scale, pan, holds the alpha, and the right, the omega. The lines from her toes to the scale pans to the tip of her crown create a lozenge or a type of vesica, by which students of mystical geometry measure the immeasurable. That which stretches the fabric of space to reveal the goddess, Crowley calls adjustment, the feminine complement of the fool, or the Joker in Harley Quinn, or the Harlequin. The combined Hebrew letters these cards represent, Aleph and Lamed, spell A-L. Remember, Liber Al, and enumerate to 31. A-L is the root of the Hebrew word for God. L-A is the Hebrew word for not. So in Western Zen of Thelema, kind of means God, not God, is that's an important concept to think about, Lanmalo Duquette says. So God, not God, I am that I am, and God, not God. I think that's an even deeper concept to think about. All right. Crowley's it's kind of, every time we get into the Crowley stuff, it's always a bit eccentric, but it's artistic too. So I kind of enjoy that, even though, it is Crowley after all. All right. Paul Foster Case, this is my favorite teacher here. So he goes in a little bit deeper with the correspondences. He says it corresponds to the Roman numeral 11, the number 11, the Hebrew letter Lamed. The value in letter, he says, is 30. It still corresponds to the faithful intelligence on the tree of life, or the 32 paths of wisdom. It still means equilibrium. It still corresponds to Libra. But its human faculty is action or work balance through elimination. The color is green, the note's F sharp, path on the tree is Gabor to Tifereth, and the cube of space, which is something we'll get into later, because I don't want to overcomplicate this, it is northwest, and in the process of alchemy, this card corresponds to sublimation. So equilibrium is the basis of the great work, says an ancient occult maxim. This might also be termed the doctrine behind all of the meanings of key 11. Consider the number itself for a few moments. 11. Note that its digits equal each other. It is in itself a glyph of balance, of equilibrium. Thus the number typifies equality, balance, poise, etc. The number 11 is also somewhat similar to the sign of the zodiacal sign Gemini and the Roman numeral 2. The idea of equilibration or balance must have for its root the idea of duality. Balance is the result of equalizing two opposing forces or activities. So key 11 stands for that which the Hindus call karma. Now this word is translated as action or work and the fruit of the action. Thus, it invariably manifests itself as absolute, undeviating justice. Note well that equilibrium is not the cessation of action, not something static, but the constant balanced reciprocal action between pairs of opposites. The law of equilibration, then, is the same as the law of polarity. Its application consists in the alternate use of contrary forces. Eliphas Levi says, quote, equilibrium is the result of two forces, but if these were absolutely and permanently equal, equilibrium would be immobility, and consequently the negation of life. Movement is the result of alternated preponderance, warmth after cold, mildness after severity, affection after anger. This is the secret of perpetual motion and the prolongation of power. To operate always on the same side and in the same manner is to overload one side of a balance, and the complete destruction of balance will soon result. Everlasting caressing quickly engenders disgust and antipathy in the same way that constant coldness or severity alienates and discourages affection in the end. End quote. Little eccentric too there, but I understand it. So the same law is also stated in the Kabbalion, thus, quote, to destroy an undesirable rate of vibration, put in operation the principle of polarity and concentrate upon the opposite pole to that which you desire to suppress. The same book gives an excellent summary of the principle of polarity. It says, everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has its pair of opposites, like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. End quote. If you give a great deal of thought to these quotations because they set forth some very basic principles, that's a lot to take in, though, isn't it? At first, you know. Hold on, I lost my spot here. I hate one. I just bumped a button and lost my spot. That sucks. So if you give a great deal of thought to those quotations because they set forth some very basic principles, they will do much to give you clear insight into the meaning of this card. So if you, and we'll get into this later, but this is what he teaches his students. So lay this out on your tarot table as directed in his lessons. And if you note the position of key 11 in relation to the others, it is the pivot, the point where all the others balance. It is the very center of the keys, the basis or hub of the wheel. It shows certain relationships which might ordinarily escape your notice. In the arrangement, the keys in the upper left-hand and lower right-hand corners are respectively 1 and 21, so their sum is 22. And since 11 is half of 22, it's mathematically the mean term or middle number between these extremes. In like manner, 11 halfway between 2 and 20, and in the spatial arrangement of the table, these two keys occupy complementary positions with references to the 11th key. And this is true of every pair of the keys, of the sum of which is 22. And I think Paul Foster Case really, that's why he did the whole cube of space thing. He got big into gematria. He liked to see the symmetry of it all. So at the present stage of your studies, this fact is chiefly valuable to establish the fundamental meaning of this card, or key 11, in your consciousness. If you desire to work with these correspondences, it will be well to know that the key bearing the lowest number is always the active term, and the highest number is always the passive term, and key 11 is always the relationship term. That is the law or agency through and by means of which the active is directed upon the passive principle. So, thus in key 1, the active term is attention, and key 21, the passive term is limitation. The relationship between them is balance. Attention directed upon a definite limited field of conscious activity through the agency of poised, balanced mindfulness or emotions and body brings about the state that enables us to effect the contact or union with the inner self, which is the entire object of our work with the tarot. Not divination, not manifesting magical things. The entire work of our work with the tarot, and I would say the deeper meanings of the occult work, is to effect or contact a union with the inner self. The Hebrew letter lamed, pronounced lamed, means ox goad, so that it suggests the idea of control, prodding the ox. The man who understands and applies the law of equilibrium has perfect control over all natural forces. An ox goad is that which urges or incites an ox to action and keeps him on the road, or whoever's driving the ox by his driver. So in tarot, the ox is the letter Aleph. And although it is not really true that we incite the superconsciousness life power to enter into activity, nor true that we in any sense control or determine its perfectly free activity, but we do seem to do both of these things. What really happens is that the life power directs itself through the functions of personal consciousness, which are represented by the letter lamed. But so far as we are concerned, those functions appear to originate within us, and Thus, all but those who are properly instructed naturally suppose these activities to be something strange to themselves, like, I didn't do that. That didn't come from within me. But it did. So control over the life force consists in attaining a state of balance where it can find free expression through our personalities. So for all practical purposes, even those who understand the truth of the matter act just as if they were directing the life power. Just as a man who knows that the sun does not revolve around the earth may nevertheless reckon the hour by its apparent position in the sky. Hopefully that makes sense. It does. It'll make sense here in a minute. The shape of the letter Lamed is that of a serpent, so that it contains more than a hint that the force represented by this letter is the same as that discussed in Key 8. Note well, however, that while the letter Tet represents a coiled serpent, Lamed represents its uncoiled and active expression. The zodiacal sign, Libra, is attributed to this key. Libra means the balance, so that its attribution to justice is obvious. It implies equilibration resulting from the action and reaction of opposites. In this sign, Venus is the ruler and Saturn is in exaltation. Venus, the Empress, you'll recall, stands for imagination. And all the books of yoga instruct their readers in the use of the imagination. The books of the alchemist abound in similar elaborate imagery, which has the same use. Modern metaphysical and advanced thought teachers have made extended use of the same principle. It is the foundation of all of the practical benefits of the tarot. Imagination builds faith. True imagination, not just fancy, rests on the firm foundation of science. The Arabian, here's a good example here. The Arabian Nights gives us a fanciful, imaginative idea of flying in the story of the magic carpet. But from Leonardo da Vinci to the Wright brothers, true creative imagination has been busy with the problem of aviation. With every advance in the exact knowledge, clear imagery became possible, and with clear imagery came firmer faith that human beings would eventually fly. Leonardo had his faith, although he never succeeded in flying, so he collected facts and classified them and made a real contribution to the science of aviation. But the Arabian spinner of fairy tales was content with mere fancy. Therefore, he had no service to give along the lines of scientific aviation, for he had no real faith in the idea of human flight. Faith is a prime requisite for the accomplishment of the great work. Without faith, you can do nothing. You must have confidence in the principles by which you operate. You must have faith in yourself. This is one reason why it is customary in occult schools to make the pupil familiar with the lives of the adepts who have achieved success in the great work. And if you don't know any, there are few better uses of your time than to study the lives of Jesus Christ and Buddha. For in what they said and did, we may find all the principles of the great work explained and exemplified. Saturn, the planet which is exalted in Libra, is the power of limitation which produces all form. It is the active power at work in karma, which expresses itself to us as undeviating justice. Hence, it is the power which has its highest manifestation in the great work, which enables us to control karma. Man can make full and complete conquest of his future. He can make whatever karma he chooses. There's a lot of silly talk about karma, and some people are so afraid of making bad karma that they do nothing at all to improve their conditions under which they live. Others are afraid of interfering with karma, and that can't be done. That's impossible. They can generate fresh karma, but they cannot change an immutable law or interfere with it. Then there is the type of person who invites his karma, and immediately thereafter has all sorts of unpleasant things happen to him. But the truth of the matter here is that he suggested the unpleasant consequences in his subconscious, which is his faith, and that fully reproduces them in his environment. He has not called down his karma. He has simply made some nice, fresh karma for himself. As a matter of fact, there is no escape from karma, period. There's really no such thing as inaction in all of the universe. The fruit of what we call inaction is loss of faculty and function, for that which is not used atrophies. But that very loss of power is action in the wrong direction. Madame Blavatsky said this, quote, "Inaction in a deed of mercy is action in a deadly sin," end quote. So the truth of the whole matter is found in the admonition, "Whatsoever thy hand findeth to do, do it with all thy might." That doesn't mean that you should exert as much force in picking up a pin as you would use to lift a crowbar with all thy might. With all thy might means that you must apply your whole power to whatever you do. Focus and concentrate, whether the degree of power be small or great. To do this takes concentration, and concentration is basically limitation, or the elimination of every distraction which takes the force away from the work that's at hand in front of you. This is why the great work is connected with the sign which represents the exaltation of Saturn, since it is the Saturnian power of concentration that is used in all stages of the operation. Justice, said Omar Khayyam, is the soul of the universe. The woman in key 11 is identical with the Empress, who is indeed the soul of the universe. She is creative imagination and the power of the subconscious to produce perfect equilibration throughout the organism. She also represents the rulership of Venus in Libra. Her crown is surmounted with a triple ornament, which is in accordance with the esoteric version of the key. It represents the serpent power in its highest manifestation, which releases human consciousness from its three-dimensional interpretation of the universe. The circle and square on the front of the crown refer to the movement of spirit within matter. Thus, it is similar to the symbolism of key 10, which shows the wheel surmounted by the 4 cherubs. The ornament of the breast of the woman is an ellipse encircling a T-cross, thus containing the mathematical elements that enter into the construction of key 21. Key 21 represents Saturn, the measuring power, so that the T, which is a measuring tool, is colored blue-violet, the color of Saturn in our color scale. The pointed blade of the sword has the same basic meaning as the ox goad. It is of steel, metal ruled by Mars, and this is a reference to the fact that wherever the Venus activity which rules Libra is called into play, the Mars force is also active, because these two are complementary, and the operation of one invariably excites the operation of the other. The sword handle is in the form of the letter Tav, so that the uplifted sword is a symbol of the exaltation of Saturn in Libra. The cape is green, referring to Venus, and also to the color of the sign of Libra. The robe is red, complementary to the green, symbolizing the Mars force mentioned in the preceding paragraph. The scales represent weighing and measuring, and they are of course closely related to the basic meanings of this key. Note that as an instrument for measuring, they again refer to the influence of Saturn in this key. The background and curtains illustrate the law of polarity by their contrasting colors. The background is yellow, the color attributed to air. The curtains are violet, which is complementary to yellow. Violet is the color attributed to Jupiter, and the curtains refer to the mechanism of cosmic activity represented by the Wheel of Fortune, because that mechanism to some extent veils the operation of the life breath. The symmetrical arrangement signifies balance. Their folds are reminiscent of the drapery of the robe of the high priestess and have the same meaning. The throne repeats the symbolism of the pillars and the veil of the high priestess on a smaller scale. Here the pillars are part of the throne and are surmounted by pomegranates instead of lotus buds to show that in key 11, in justice, the activity represented has arrived at fruition. This week, consider your actions more carefully than you have ever done before. Try to keep in mind that your present actions are the basis of your future conditions. Go about your daily tasks earnestly, no matter how trivial they may seem. It's not the size of importance of the action that counts, but the manner of its accomplishment. No one ever did great things well who had not done first small things well. Do not misinterpret this to mean that you should drive yourself mad or push yourself unmercifully. To do so is a wrong action, for you place a strain upon your mind and body, whereas you should care for them as diligently as you would any other fine animal that you expected to serve you faithfully and well. But the beginning of the solution of your problem is to understand the meaning of right action. That way you go and act rightly. Go about your duties in a poised, quiet manner. When you sit down to study, sit quietly and perfectly still. Teach your body the meaning of balance. This is not only highly necessary training for an occultist, but it is the most potent suggestion you can give to the subconscious that you wish to set to work to equilibrate your entire organism. Don't be afraid. Be free from anxiety. Do not yield to the mood of haste, and whatever you do, try as best as you can to realize that every activity is a particular expression of the perfect action of the life force. Look upon your desires as present realities. This is what the wise ones counsel. Damn. That's pretty deep by Paul Foster Case, isn't it? And when I think about this card, I think about, which I know that we've talked about this on the broadcast before, but your perfect power and focus is focus and concentration, but also like in balance. Even batteries, when they work perfectly when they're balanced right. Everything works the best when it's balanced. Your body works the best when it's balanced. Relationships work the best when they're balanced, right? So, learning, in my opinion, like learning and studying with you guys what this means and kind of learning how to use it in a deeper way in our lives is really cool, actually. And remember, you can get these books that I do these videos from. They're in the links, but it is the Kabbalistic Tarot by Robert Wang, the one by Lon Malo Duquette that studies the Thoth Tarot, and then you have Paul Foster Case's books on the tarot too. They're all there if you just click the links. So, maybe let's keep this one in mind for a while. Thanks for listening to the Tarot series. Until next time, until the next card.